The boardroom fell into an uncomfortable silence after the little girl's voice echoed through the glass walls. "Mommy," the word didn't belong there. Not in a room filled with steel, ambition, tailored suits, and people who measured time in profits and losses. Yet it hung in the air, fragile and undeniable, like a truth no one was ready to face. The CEO slowly turned around. She was known for many things: precision, authority, emotional distance. People said she could dismantle a $1 billion deal without raising her voice. That she never let personal feelings interfere with business, that she had built this empire alone. But in that moment, all of that disappeared. Her eyes locked onto the little girl standing by the door, clutching the edge of a worn blue backpack, her curls slightly messy, her shoes scuffed in a way only playgrounds could explain. The girl looked up at her with certainty, not curiosity, not confusion, recognition. The CEO lips parted, but no words came out. Every executive in the room froze. This wasn't part of the meeting agenda. This wasn't a crisis they could manage with numbers or strategies. This was something raw, something human. "Sir," the CEO finally said, her voice tight as she turned to the man sitting closest to her. "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" The single father stood up slowly. He wasn't dressed like the others. His suit was clean but clearly old, sleeves slightly creased, shoes polished carefully but worn from years of use. He carried himself with humility, the kind born not from weakness, but from surviving things no one else could see. He looked down at his daughter, then back at the CEO. The room waited. This was the moment that would change everything. He inhaled deeply, as if preparing to open a door he'd kept locked for years. "Because," he said quietly to her, "you never left." A murmur rippled through the room. The CEO expression hardened, not with anger, but with confusion fighting something deeper, something buried. "That doesn't make sense," she said sharply. "I've never met her before." The man shook his head gently. "You don't remember," he replied, "but she does." The CEO hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the conference table. She hadn't trembled in years, not when markets crashed, not when rivals tried to destroy her, but now, standing before a child who looked at her like home, her control began to crack. "Explain," she demanded. The father nodded. 7 years ago, he began. "You weren't the CEO, you weren't powerful, you weren't untouchable." Her jaw tightened. "You were a woman running from your past." The words hit her like a sudden blow. The room seemed to fade as memories unwanted, half-forgotten, stirred at the edges of her mind. Rain, a hospital corridor, a decision she thought she'd buried. The little girl took a few steps forward. "Mommy," she said again, softly this time, "you said you'd come back." The CEO breath caught. She stared at the child's face. The shape of her eyes, the small scar near her eyebrow, a scar she recognized. Her knees weakened. "No," she whispered. The father's voice broke through the silence. "You left her with me," he said. "Not because you didn't love her, but because you thought she deserved better than the life you were about to fight for." The CEO mind raced. She remembered the night now, a young man sitting beside a hospital bed, papers trembling in her hands. A future that demanded everything or nothing at all. She had chosen ambition. She had chosen survival. She had chosen to walk away. I watched her grow. The father continued. "Every birthday, every fever, every night she cried for you, and every time she asked where her mommy was, I told her the truth." The CEO swallowed hard. "What truth?" she asked. "That you were becoming someone strong enough to protect her one day?" The girl smiled. "I knew you'd come back," she said confidently. The CEO felt something inside her collapse. Years of walls. Years of control. Years of pretending nothing hurt. All undone by one small voice. The board members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't business anymore. This was something far bigger. The father straightened his shoulders. "I didn't come here to expose you," he said. "I came here for the job, to provide for her, because being her father has been the greatest responsibility of my life." He paused. "But if you ask why she calls you mommy," He looked at his daughter with love. It's because no matter how long you were gone, she never stopped believing in you. The CEO eyes filled with tears she didn't remember how to control. For the first time in her life, success felt small, and the past had finally caught up with her. The room held its breath as she took one shaky step toward the child. The CEO stood frozen as the little girl's small hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting, as if it had always belonged there. The room seemed to shrink, the glass walls closing in, the city skyline blurring into nothing but distant noise. For years she had commanded rooms larger than this, negotiated with people far more dangerous than a child with hopeful eyes, yet she had never felt this powerless. The weight in her chest was not fear, it was recognition. A truth she had outrun for so long had finally caught up, not with anger, but with innocence. "I didn't mean to disappear," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought leaving was the only way to survive." The single father watched her closely, not with resentment, but with the quiet exhaustion of someone who had carried both roles for too long. "You were scared," he said calmly, "and you were alone. I never blamed you for that. But the cost of that choice didn't disappear when you did." The CEO nodded slowly, tears slipping free despite every instinct to stop them. She looked down at the child, realizing with a shock how familiar her smile was, how the curve of her cheeks mirrored her own reflection from years ago. "Do you know who I am?" she asked softly. The girl smiled wider. "You're my mommy, and you're really busy. Daddy says you're helping a lot of people." Something inside the CEO broke completely. Not shattered, softened. Years of building armor suddenly felt pointless. All the titles, the wealth, the power, none of it had prepared her for the quiet dignity in the father's eyes, or the unconditional love in her daughter's voice. The boardroom door slowly closed behind the last executive, who had quietly excused themselves. No one wanted to witness this moment. "It wasn't scandal, it was sacred. I didn't come here to take her from you," the father said gently, sensing the storm in her expression. "I came because she deserves honesty, and because I believe people can change." The CEO lowered herself to her knees in front of the child, ignoring the expensive suit, the cold marble floor, the image she had spent her life protecting. "I missed everything," she said, voice trembling, "every first step, every bedtime story. I can't undo that." The girl reached up and wiped a tear from her face with her sleeve. "You're here now," she said simply. "That's what matters." That was the moment the CEO realized something no boardroom had ever taught her. Success meant nothing if there was no one waiting for you at the end of the day. She stood slowly and turned to the father. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said, "but I want to try, not as a CEO, not as a powerful woman, as her mother." The man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Trying is all she ever wanted. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that inside a glass tower, a family had begun again, not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. Weeks later, headlines would talk about a CEO who stepped back from her empire, about a company culture that changed overnight, about a leader who redefined strength. But the real story wouldn't be in the news. It would be in the mornings when a little girl laughed at breakfast, in the evenings when 3 chairs replaced 2 at the dinner table, in the quiet moments where regret transformed into responsibility. And if this story touched you, if you believe that redemption is real, that love can return even after years of silence, then subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this don't just entertain. They remind us who we are, what we've lost, and what we can still choose to become. Sometimes the most powerful comeback isn't in business, it's in the heart.